Excuse me. Hi, nobodies. Um, excuse me again. Um, Today I'm going to talk about something really, really serious. In this world, there are a lot of dangers for people. Um, People always worry about their kids getting killed, whether they're 3 or 30 or 50. You always worry about something bad happening to the people you love. And our legal system doesn't always give the appropriate punishment for what somebody has actually done, um, particularly in sexual assaults, whether it's sexual assault of a child or an adult. I don't think that the legal system quite recognizes what that kind of violation does to a person. It's like murder in a way. People, an adult can get better, but there's always going to be that fear because it's happened. Now, you could look at it logically and say, well, the chances of it happening again are really slim, because I've already been that 1 in 3 or whatever, but it's, if it's a one time event, the therapy course for that can help so much. The pro and people, will look at rape as just, like it's no big deal. It's a crime, no doubt, but they're just like, oh, well, they're getting their therapy and this person will be out in 5 some odd years. And it's like, that's really not appropriate. They should get, when it, especially if it's one where it's like, okay, this person did not know this other person, this person was attacked out of nowhere. That kind of thing, really deserves a higher sentence. I mean, it really does, because, that person will have nightmares for the rest of their life. You can bet. Even if they get well enough to continue their life, they will do it with a lot of safety measures in place, and they will have nightmares. Constant nightmares, especially when the person who did it gets out. It's something that gnaws at them, and they have to deal with that too. The other thing I wanted to talk about aside from that is children. I get really upset when I meet people who were molested or raped as children, or had to do things that children should not have to do. Um, I get really upset because we're supposed to protect our kids. I mean, especially if it's a parent doing it, because it's like, hey, that's your kid. You shouldn't want to do that to any kid, but that's your flesh and blood. You're supposed to protect them. And then if I find out that it came to light and they weren't offered therapy, it's like they got failed twice. Because let me tell you something about that kind of thing. If it happens once, it's going to harm them. It's going to cause problems down the line, because being put in a situation that your mind is not ready to deal with skews the way your mind deals with it in the future. You get, I would almost bet that most of the hookers that you meet, whether they're on drugs or not, have a history of sexual abuse done to them. Um, because, you would think that a person who was abused by a parent in that fashion would turn gay. Like if it's a girl and a dad, or a son and a dad, that would be the way it would turn for the girl, that she'd be gay, or she'd be um, completely celibate, like not want anything to do with it. Sorry about that. I had a message pop up. And but that's not always how it works out. It skews your sexual identity. So, you know, I was molested as a kid one time that I didn't consent to because I didn't know what was going on. I can talk about it because um, one of the lovely things about BPD is that you can separate your emotions from events, or at least I can. Um, I can say that happened to me without, and I can picture that happened to me without putting where I was at emotionally at the time. It serves me well as far as talking about things go, is that, anything bad that happened, it's like a separate, it's just a fact. It has no emotion attached to it. Um, and I'll say, well, that makes me mad, or that shouldn't have happened, or whatever. Now, after what happened to me, I was caught quite a bit doing things I should not have been doing. Um, because what happened to me, I guess I liked it. So I kept going out and looking for things that I liked. Um, but what happened to me was not, it wasn't somebody I was supposed to trust. It wasn't a parent. It wasn't a family member. It wasn't something that happened repeatedly. It wasn't something that hurt me, physically. Um, so, but even that impacted my mind. It sexualized me before I was ready to be sexualized. And that is a component that it doesn't matter. Anytime you're introduced to sex before you're ready to, it's going to mess up your head. It's going to do your head in. And then when you add components to it, like this was somebody who's supposed to protect you, when you add components of they hurt you, it wasn't you felt good. No, you got hurt. You add those components into it, and you've got a whole tangle of fucked up in your head. And even to the point of, I've known people who have gone through years of sexual abuse and feel nothing. I've known people who've gone through that, and after they're done having sex, they go cry, you know, and then they feel bad that they're crying, you know. I've known people who cannot enjoy sex because they are so mentally screwed up because of what happened to them. So it really makes me mad when that stuff comes to light and a parent doesn't say, we need them to talk to somebody. Because that, you can't just brush it off. It's not like it's not like falling off your skateboard and breaking your arm, where you remember the pain, but works good as new now. No, this is like severe mental torture. This is the definition of what causes complex PTSD, or you could just say PTSD in general. Um, One of the things a lot of people with personality disorders will be able to compare is that, they've had something happen to them, if they've got any kind of sexual dysfunction going on. Some people function well, but when you grow up in a family like that, when you grow up having something like that happen repeatedly, You learn to put on a mask. You learn to hide it. You learn to leave that place. A lot of people learn to leave that place mentally. You know, DID, to my knowledge, has never been proven to be even slightly genetic. And it's almost always caused by traumatic events that a child's mind just can't deal with. As an adult, your mind is strong enough to where it just causes PTSD. It's a trigger because you don't have a developing mind that says, hey, we'll go someplace else. We're not here. This isn't happening to me. It's happening to somebody else. You know, and a lot of these people that have this happen to them, you know, have, and it doesn't matter if you're an adult and it's a unknown rapist or if you're a child and it's your parent. Shame. You're ashamed. And nobody should carry shame for something that should not have happened to them. Something that was done by the person who should be carrying the shame. That person should carry the burden of they did something they were not supposed to do. They did something that was completely wrong and completely just disgusting. And in my opinion, should be fucking dead. I mean, maybe not the rapist, but a parent who sexually abuses their child or any child. I mean, I really don't like pedophiles. I really, really don't. Because that is so wrong on so many levels. And then you look at what it does to somebody mentally. I mean, it's just, and it's happening all the time. That's the thing. And nobody's really getting any help. People are ashamed that it happened. They act like it's their fault. Heck, they even act like if at any point in time they enjoy any of it, they feel ashamed about that. You know, if they enjoyed any of it. That doesn't typically happen like with the parent thing, I don't think. But like when you're 3 years old and somebody's touching you, you may not be upset about it at the time. But as you get older, you realize that was wrong and that caused a lot of behavior that is wrong. And then going to, in my life, you know, going from that as that having to be a hidden thing, and my activities afterwards had to be a hidden thing because my family was very, very, very sexually repressive. Like we never saw anything going on. You know, it was like, you know, and if you have sex and you're not married, if you do anything sexual and you're not married, you're a whore. Except for my brother. My brother, I don't think, got that kind of talk. But we weren't loved on or anything like that. But my experience is different, and it still fucked me up in ways. You know, and then I went and fucked myself up more by doing things I shouldn't have done. And everything. Now, so, I mean, kids need help. And we really need to, as a society, learn to recognize the signs that a kid is in trouble. Because an 8-year-old, hang on a sec, a small child is not going to be able to, or even a teenager maybe, is not going to be able to hide when that kind of thing starts up. Their mask, if they've lived a good childhood up to that point, they don't know how to design a foolproof mask. And to keep something like that secret, you have to design a hell of a mask. And like I said, most most kids, you take a 6 or 7 or even a 10-year-old kid, they don't know how to make that mask. So there's going to be signs, and we have to know those signs and make sure that they get help, make sure that it stops and that they get help. I don't typically talk, I don't typically ask people when they let me in on that part of their life. I don't typically ask them, like, what all happened? How did you feel? No, because that's stuff that I'm like, if they wanted to tell me, they would tell me, because I don't want to dive into that kind of sickness, and I don't ever ask them, why didn't you tell somebody? You know, I don't ask them that, because I don't want them to relive um, the feelings that they felt about all that was happening to them. Because, see, that's another thing. Telling on somebody, they've all got different reasons on why they don't tell. And it's normally something that is triggering, just remembering that feeling of, I want this to stop, but I can't because of da 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 da. And I know a lady that she quit because she told, because she had a sibling born and she didn't want it to happen to her sibling. But by then, the person abusing her had kind of lost interest because she had gotten older. And I don't know how it affects her daily life. I really don't. But I know she walks around with scars. I know she does. And those kinds of scars, they don't go away. I mean, you can put, like, on scars of, like, physical abuse, you can set that aside. You could put, like, Mederma, like mental Mederma on it, to where the scar will kind of fade, because it was wrong. That, like, maybe they've apologized for doing that because they, for one reason or another, that's who they were. And you get ways of soothing the hurt of being beat upon. You might even, now, just like with words, like the shit that your parents might have said to you if you were getting emotional abuse, that stuff scars you. You can sit there and you can tell yourself they were being an asshole. They didn't mean it. It's not true. But it stays with you forever. I mean, till the day you die, you'll hear their words in your head. Even though you know that they were wrong for saying it, they were wrong in thinking it, they were wrong about you. And no amount of therapy will erase the gnats that they put in your head, the negative automatic thoughts that a mental abuser puts in your head. You just have to learn to not listen to it. So you can tell yourself, I'm not listening to that. Nope. The sexual abuse, though, it's always there. It is always there. Even if they learn to deal with it, come to terms with it, and all that kind of stuff, there's still that anger, rage, sadness, shame, all of that, because like, there are things I tell my therapist that I am ashamed to say out loud, and I will never, ever, ever, ever say to anyone else some of the thoughts that go through my mind. And I'm like, oh, that's wrong. That is so wrong. You shouldn't even think that. Like, I hate that. I'm ashamed that I think the thought. And my therapist has said, it's okay. What you're thinking is okay. There's nothing wrong with what you've got in your head. But she can't make me believe it. Just like you can't tell a victim of all that stuff. I can say all day long, don't be ashamed. but they're still going to be ashamed. So they need therapy. I mean, there's just no ifs, ands, or buts around it. They need therapy, and they need specific therapy, like therapy from somebody who is used to working with people who've been through what they've been through. It can't just be your run of the mill therapist. It has to be somebody who knows the struggle. It doesn't necessarily have to be a victim of it, but somebody who knows what works and keeps up to date on what works and treatments and all that kind of stuff to help that person, because it is a PTSD type of thing. I mean, I'd get my ass whooped when I was a kid. There were a couple of times I had welts, and that stuck in my mind, the times when they were too rough with me. But it's, I always downplay it because I know people who have it worse. And that's something that a lot of mental health, a lot of people who have some kind of mental health issue going on, we all say. And I mean, I have even heard people who I'm like, oh my God, what you've been through. Oh my God. And they will still say, I know people who've had it worse. I shouldn't complain, or whatever, they'll downplay it. And it's like, what? No, no, don't downplay that shit. Villainize who needs to be villainized, you know, but they need specific therapy. You need specific therapy when your damage is something so deep and so psychologically twisted, because sexual abuse is more than just sexual abuse, it's psychological abuse too. And it's physical abuse. Um, it's all that stuff, and it's PTSD. And if I was gonna, and when they put it in the DSM-5, I'm sure just about everybody will be. It'll be considered a an events that cause complex PTSD. And when you look at what the symptoms are and all that other kind of stuff, it's too much for one soul to bear alone. Somebody needs to be vilified, you know, um, for what they did. They need to be called out on it. But we don't need, if the victim doesn't want to say exactly what happened or talk about exactly what happened, we can't push them. They have to be willing to say it. They have to be willing to say what happened and what they, you know, maybe even what was said to them, sometimes. But I mean, it depends on the person, and a good therapist needs to be a specialist in that kind of thing to know how to get the right therapy set up for that person. But anyway, I talked way too long about that. And I know this was like a super heavy subject. If you've dealt with that, get help. If you haven't, look for signs. Like, look up on the internet signs so you can spot it on the people you see. Maybe have a conversation. Figure out ways that you can help that person if you think that they might be getting abused. Because we need to notice these things. We need to get these kids help before it goes on for years, before they perfect that mask of everything's okay. And y'all have a good night.